The sea was never quiet near Blackshore Point. Waves rolled endlessly toward the rugged cliffs, crashing into the dark rocks like restless thoughts, and rising above that wild coastline stood the old lighthouse, tall, weathered, and painted with the fading strokes of decades of storms. Inside lived a cat. His name was Silas, a large, long-haired gray and white cat with deep amber eyes and a calm, almost ancient presence. No one knew exactly how long he had lived there. Some fishermen claimed he had appeared 10 years ago. Others said 15. The lighthouse keeper, Elias, who was well into his 70s, simply said, "He was here before I was." Silas had a habit of sitting on the top railing, overlooking the endless sea as though guarding it. Locals jokingly called him the spirit of the coast, though some, especially children, whispered with quiet reverence that the cat could sense storms before anyone else. And perhaps it was true. Elias lived a simple life. Every morning he lit the lantern, checked the machinery, tended to the old generator, and then made tea while Silas curled up near the stove. They were an old pair, a wordless companionship built on years of silent understanding. But one evening, everything changed. The air was too still, too heavy. Silas, usually composed and graceful, paced anxiously across the wooden floorboards. His tail flicked sharply. His ears twitched at something unheard. He kept returning to the window that faced the open ocean. Elias frowned. "You feel something, boy?" Silas stared at the horizon, where a faint silver line began to shimmer under the setting sun. The lighthouse keeper felt the pressure shift. The silence thickened. And then he heard it, distant thunder rolling like the growl of the earth. "A storm," he muttered. But there was something else, something different. A strange ache gripped his chest, the kind he hadn't felt in years. Worry. He climbed the stairs to the lantern room. Silas followed, moving quickly, pushing against Elias's legs as if urging him. Outside, the sea had begun to churn. Clouds raced over the water, swirling like dark wings. Elias's heart stuttered. "No," he whispered. A fishing boat, small, fragile against the vastness, was struggling far too close to the cliffs. And on that boat was someone he knew. Lena, his granddaughter, the only family he had left. The storm struck with terrifying speed. Wind screamed against the lighthouse. Rain hit the windows hard enough to rattle the frames. Waves rose like dark mountains, crashing against the rocks with explosive force. The radio crackled with static, broken, useless. Elias ran down the stairs, grabbing his coat and boots, but Silas leapt in front of him, blocking the door. "Move, Silas." The cat didn't. He looked straight into Elias's eyes and gave a low, trembling meow, a sound filled not with fear, but with understanding, as if he knew what Elias intended, and begged him to reconsider. But Elias shoved the door open anyway, fighting the roaring wind. Silas followed. Outside, the world was a violent blur. Water, wind, darkness. The boat was being thrown mercilessly by the waves. Lena was at the helm, desperately trying to hold the wheel steady. Her soaked hair stuck to her face. Her eyes, frantic and terrified, scanned the coast. And then she saw the lighthouse, a beam cut through the storm, strong, steady, unmistakable. Her grandfather, somehow, impossibly, he had strengthened the light. Lena sobbed with relief, but the sea showed no mercy. A monstrous wave crashed into the boat, sending it spinning. She lost her balance, thrown into the railing. Pain shot through her arm. Rain blinded her. The boat drifted toward the rocks with terrifying speed. On the cliffs, Elias and Silas reached the edge. Elias stumbled, gasping for breath. Age weighed heavily on him, but Silas was not afraid. He moved ahead, ears flat, fur soaked, paws silent on the slippery stone. He stopped at the highest point, the place where the rocks jutted like jagged teeth into the sea. And then, Silas did something unbelievable. He began to meow, loudly, powerfully, echoing over the storm. It was a sound Lena recognized, the guiding sound, the same rhythm he used whenever she visited the lighthouse years ago. She turned the wheel toward the sound instinctively. Silas continued, his voice a beacon in the darkness. His amber eyes glowed faintly in the flashes of lightning. His tail flicked, signaling direction. He stepped back slowly, guiding her through the narrow gap between two deadly reefs, a path only locals knew, a path Silas had watched for years. The boat scraped past danger, battered but intact. Lena steered toward the small inlet beside the lighthouse, the only safe landing spot. Elias sank to his knees in relief, but Silas did not rest. He ran toward the inlet, across the slippery cliffs, his paws moving with desperate determination. As the boat reached the shore, Lena jumped into the shallow water, stumbling toward the rocks. She saw Silas approaching and dropped to her knees, hugging the soaked cat tightly. "You saved me," she whispered into his wet fur, trembling. Silas purred, weakly but reassuringly. Elias arrived moments later, breathless, tears blending with the rain as he embraced them both. Hours passed before the storm finally began to calm. All three sat by the warm stove inside the lighthouse, wrapped in blankets, drying slowly. Lena leaned on her grandfather's shoulder. Silas lay curled against her stomach, eyes half closed. Elias stroked the cat gently. "You're not just a spirit of the coast," he said softly. "You're our guardian." Silas gave a faint purr. In the days that followed, the story of the storm spread through Blackshore Point. Fishermen, sailors, and villagers all spoke of the lighthouse cat who had guided a boat through the deadliest storm in years. Some claimed they saw him glowing, others swore they heard his voice through the wind. But Lena and Elias knew the truth. Silas had always been watching, always protecting, always listening to the whispers of the sea, and from that night on, no one called him merely a lighthouse cat. He became a legend, a guardian of the coast, a silent hero whose amber eyes never stopped watching the horizon, ready for anyone who needed him again.